Elder abuse is expected to rise with the aging population. Experts predict that seniors will make up 23% of the country by 2050, up from 16.5% right now. According to Adult Protective Services in Bexar County, the population of people aged 65 years and older was more than 295,000. Now that makes up a little over 13% of our population. The occurrences of neglect and abuse is increasing rapidly. In our community, Adult Protective Services investigated more than 3,000 valid cases of elder abuse in 2023. Today, we're joined by Alex Aguian from RBFCU, Marissa Back, and Lisa Centeno from Adult Protective Services. Thank you all for joining me so much today. We'll hear those stories about how our local officials are responding to the mistreatment of some of our most vulnerable neighbors. And thank you all so much. So we want to first start specifically talking about how we define different types of elder abuse. So there's physical, sexual, exploitation, neglect, abandonment, financial, and even self-neglect. So I want to ask you all, our first question, what are some of the characteristics of these different types of abuse?
So some characteristics that we commonly see, and when we get these cases that come to us, it's not always just, oh, there's an allegation of self-neglect. A lot of times they're commingled, so you can see self-neglect and exploitation altogether. So a lot of the general signs for all of it can be isolation, maybe just lack of necessities. That can be an indicator of obviously self-neglect, exploitation, if somebody's managing their money, but then they're going without their necessities like medication. That's an indication of something might be going on. Poor and unkempt person, so like maybe they're not bathing, maybe they're going without their medications or not making their appointments. A lot of that can be an indicator of something going on at home.
So these issues are compounded and some can even have a domino effect.
Exactly.
Let's talk about self-neglect. What are some of the signs of that type?
Sometimes when you're looking at self-neglect, Avery, we're looking at individuals that aren't really able to take care of themselves, or perhaps they may have recently had a medical condition. But you know, we're talking about individuals that might have difficulties preparing their meals, bathing, dressing themselves. You know, just that inability to provide for their own care, and struggling to provide for their own care.
Who is most at risk when it comes to elder abuse?
Those that are on their own, they may not be involved with a church or a daycare or anything like that, that they don't have somebody who's kind of just looking out for them. They're at risk for mainly self-neglect, but those that are anybody. Elders and disabled adults, they're our most vulnerable population other than children.
I know you've seen this from the financial side too.
Yeah, absolutely. When talking about financial exploitation and scams, we see both. Financial exploitation is going to be somebody who they typically know or trust, a relative, a friend, a family member who has gained their trust and is taking advantage of their finances. Sometimes it starts out small, $100 here, $100 there. Once they gain access to their finances and know what their savings looks like or how much that they can borrow, it grows from there. And then you have scams. Scams are going to be targeted attacks to these individuals. Typically we'll see tech support scams. We'll see scams where they're trying to exploit their finances for investments or products or services. But the tech support scams are a growing trend. It's something that targets everybody, but our elder community is more susceptible because of their lack of knowledge when it comes to technology.
And we'll get into those scams a little bit later, specifically to talk about some of the things you're seeing, like you said, the trends. Let's talk about the warning signs of elder abuse. I mean, obviously there are so many different types and every case looks so different, but what are some telltale signs that someone might be experiencing some form of this?
You know, some of the things to be on the lookout for is just, you know, is the individual taking care of themselves, as I mentioned earlier? You know, is the individual have the proper assistance in the home so that they can age in place with the support systems that they need? You know, is the individual able to get their groceries? Are they able to take care of themselves? Is there anybody that's recently moved into the home or has immediately started to befriend somebody? You want to add on a little bit?
Yeah, I'll add something that like their patterns change. So if they were very heavily involved in church, or they were active at daycare or the senior center, or even bingo or girls' night, if they stop going to that, that might be an indication of something. Maybe it's isolation, maybe they're just embarrassed of a situation that they have going on. So if you're able to check in on them to see, if not, if you have any type of concern, that's what entities like us are here for, to follow up on stuff like that.
From the financial standpoint, some of the signs are going to be change in spending patterns. You're going to see somebody who maybe is on a set income, who never had issues paying their bills and their utilities, who maybe now can't because they've spent their funds on other things, or have lent it out. You're going to see transactions out of the norm. Somebody who typically isn't familiar with electronics having large purchases at electronic stores. Somebody who doesn't drive anymore having finances being spent towards automobiles or the care of an automobile or maintenance of an automobile. So those are some of the things that stand out to us. Their spending patterns typically.
Maybe even some strange POAs that are coming in out of nowhere.
Yeah, for in-person transactions, if they're being accompanied by individuals who tend to speak for them after, or they're checking to see how much that person needs to withdraw, or how much did you say you needed again, facilitating that transaction for them. And a lot of times, if they are being taken advantage of or exploited, they may seem a little bit nervous. They may seem, scared of the individual that's asking for the funds.
As we've been preparing for this town hall and doing stories and research into elder abuse and the different types, one of the things that stuck out to me was that this, action doesn't have to be bound by an age. This conversation is about older adults, but action can come from any age level. This is something that all community members sort of need to be aware of, the warning signs and that sort of thing. I want to transition it over to the other side of elder abuse. Let's talk about how you can tell if someone might be acting abusive, especially if it's a loved one.
I would say that sometimes elder abuse, it's difficult to detect. And so, but when you have a caregiver or family member, as Alex mentioned earlier, that is hovering over the individual, won't let them talk to their financial institution by themselves, somebody that's controlling, those are signs, that maybe somebody could be in an abusive situation. Where they are trying to control the individual's life and take over their life.
They won't let you isolate that individual to ask questions on their own, right? It's
Right.
We'll see when we're in the middle of an investigation or interviewing them, the other person or the person who may be taken advantage of doesn't want them to be alone, or doesn't want them to be asked questions without them present that they can't intervene on.
And it could just be, I'm so sorry, Lisa.
Oh, that's okay.
It could just be how they're presenting themselves to us, how they're speaking to us as strangers and somebody who's just there for the well-being of their loved one. Their aggressiveness towards us, it makes us kind of question, like, if you're acting like this towards a stranger who's asking about the well-being of your loved one, how are you acting towards that person? So just their reaction towards us and towards the financial institutions could be a big red flag as well.
Yeah. I want to take us to our first story now, specifically to sort of talk about with this rise in elder abuse cases, and the concern is growing across the city and the county. So June is Elder Abuse Awareness Month, and it's pushing leaders across our city to find new ways to address this issue.
We have a serious problem here.
Staggering statistics show elder abuse is on the rise in San Antonio.
Those numbers are scary and they're high.
Over the last 10 years in Bexar County, Adult Protective Services saw an increased case count, with a jump of about 2,500 cases. The county says that puts our area near the top of the list in Texas for elder abuse.
Historically, we're either number 1 or number 2 in elder abuse and exploitation and neglect.
Elder abuse is commonly defined as an intentional or neglectful act that causes harm to an older adult by another person. The most common types are physical abuse, psychological abuse, financial exploitation, neglect and abandonment, and sexual abuse. Nationwide, 1 in 10 adults over the age of 65 are expected to experience some kind of elder abuse each year.
Oftentimes when you see them at their most vulnerable, and people do swoop in and take advantage.
Probate court judge Veronica Vasquez says at the county level, she's working to secure grants to help with training and prosecution. She also helps lead the Elder Abuse and Exploitation Task Force.
I'm hopeful that the changes that we're trying to make in Bexar County, that we can be a leader.
The county now is also teaming up with the city to help increase the number of reported cases. District 6 Councilwoman Melissa Cabello Haverda signed this council consideration request. It would look into training all front-facing city employees to recognize the signs of elder abuse.
If they see potential abuse, they're able to identify it and they're able to report it.
This request passed through some initial stages and is now waiting to be heard in San Antonio's Public Safety Committee. But in the meantime, one sentiment is clear across both the county in the city.
The issue is so large.
It's a topic people shy away from.
You see something, you say something, even if you just suspect it.
Avery Everett, KSAT 12 News. So at the end of this town hall, we're going to continue to provide you with more resources, but to report suspected elder abuse, we want to remind you, you can reach out to Adult Protective Services by calling the number on your screen right now. We also have that number on our website with a ton of other information. So let's bring it back to the questions here. I want to know, are there laws related to elder abuse and, sort of protecting our older adults?
Yes, so I can't speak too much to federal laws, but Texas Penal Code does have a lot of stuff regarding elder and disabled individuals. So you have financial abuse, but anything can fall under to protect them. So abuse of credit card, fraud, identity theft, stuff like that. They don't have to be elderly to fit that penal code. They also have financial exploitation of an elderly disabled individual. Last legislative session, they actually added disabled and elderly individuals to the abandonment and endanger penal code that they had that only reflected children. So that was finally added last legislature. So now elderly people, disabled adults are protected under that.
Wow, that's huge. What can people do to reduce their risk of experiencing elder abuse?
Learn the signs. Just check in on your elderly people, your disabled folks. Just being around and being a shoulder to lean on really makes a huge difference. Another set of eyes, that's a big thing that we do, is we implement services, because the more eyes, the better. The more eyes, the more knowledge and education is a huge thing. Events like this, it increases our intakes because people understand maybe I am going through something, maybe I do need help, so we get those increasing calls. But it's just a matter of, if something's not feeling right for that adult, then to just call us.
Yeah, and I would say it's no secret we're all going to get old right at some time, so we should prepare for that. We should have conversations with our family of who's going to manage our finances in the future when that happens. And those of us with elderly relatives should be having those conversations amongst ourselves of who's going to manage their account, who's going to be listed as a power of attorney, who's going to be listed as a joint on the account. And I would say, to help hold the other people accountable to avoid financial exploitation, it's always good to have at least more than one person involved in those conversations to hold the other person accountable as well. Because circumstances change. Somebody who had good intentions may down the road have not so good intentions when they have situations that arise. So,
Alex, we've had an influx of questions come in specifically about financial exploitation, scams. So a lot of these questions are going to be focused at you, but I'd love it if either of you could weigh in from your perspectives at any point. So let's first talk. How would you define financial exploitation?
Like I mentioned earlier, financial exploitation is almost always going to be somebody who they've spent time with, whether it's months or years, a family member, a friend, a grandchild, somebody who has working knowledge of that individual's finances, sometimes who has been trusted, who we thought had good intentions. And it'll start off small, borrowing $100 here for this. Sometimes they have access to their debit cards, to their checkbooks, to their online banking profiles, because they've been trusted to manage this. And why I mentioned it's good to have more than one person, because those circumstances could change, and that person that is in charge of their finances could start to exploit those finances and use them for their own benefit and not the benefit of the elderly individual.
Walk me through how that is different than a scam.
Yeah, a scam's going to be targeted. Typically, a bad actor is going to target a group or a specific demographic, specifically elder community in this conversation. They may contact them via phone, via text message. A lot of times, if they're online, a pop-up might come up on their computer, and it could be anything ranging from, hey, I have a great investment for you in purchasing gold or silver, don't trust your financial institutions anymore. Or your computer has a virus on it, and we need to fix it immediately, or all of your information is at stake. You're in danger of losing everything. So they may click on a link. They may not be too tech savvy. They don't have anybody in the household to help them navigate through this, and they're going to follow the instructions of who they believe to be an official tech support person reaching out to them on their computer. They'll ask them to send them money. They'll ask them for control over their computer so they can gain access to their files and their passwords and their online banking profiles. That's typically how a scam would work. It's going to be somebody that they don't know, and they're just making contact with, and they're trying to trick them into investing their funds into a product, a service, or a tech support.
And what are the most common types of scams you're seeing right now?
Before coming here, I actually met with a lot of my team members and got the trends that we were seeing in the last 2 months, and the tech support scams are ticking up. Tech support scams, we're seeing a lot of individuals who are being sent checks that they maybe won a sweepstakes that they didn't enter, but they're excited that they got a check for $5,000, and they're being educated either by telephone or by letter to deposit the check and send some of the funds or the proceeds back. But the tech support scams is a big one, like I said, and because this elderly community is not, a lot of them are not tech savvy. They don't know the questions to ask, and they're going to trust the individuals that are on the phone. So.
And obviously these scams target the most vulnerable populations. When we spoke earlier, you said that that's younger people who are just signing into their bank, and then that's the older adults. But I mean, these are tips that people across the board can take away when it comes to scams, because everyone's susceptible. And they really play into like fear and urgency, like you're saying, and emotion and that trust. My next question for you, so how can we prevent this? What are some things? You talked about that two-party system of having someone keep you accountable. What else?
A two-party system is going to be important in talking to, I think you mentioned it earlier, just having conversations and talking to your family members about this sort of stuff ahead of time. I'll be frank with you, a lot of the conversations we have with our members who are victims of scams or potential victims of scams or financial exploitation don't want to hear that from us. We're having a 10-minute conversation with them, advising them how to, to them, we're telling them how not to spend their money or how to spend their money, and that, we're trying to educate them that they're being taken advantage of. They don't want to hear that because they're hearing different from somebody who they've invested months and years with, that they trust, or somebody who's educated them over the phone for hours on this great opportunity, and they're spending 10 minutes talking with us, and we're telling them that this could be a scam. It's important for the families to speak to their relatives and they educate them of these scams and ask those questions. Pay attention to new relationships that they may be making, of course. And it's about staying in touch with them and asking them, helping them manage their finances, especially when you notice that they may be in a cognitive decline and not have the ability to do that themselves.
I spoke with the San Antonio Police Department for our stories and our research, and they had been talking about how scams are also changing. AI is now being involved in scams, and obviously that's hard to detect at any age, let alone someone, especially when they play into that fear and the urgency. My question to you, we talked about it before we started this town hall. Walk me through the system of code words, but also just ending a call if it's from someone and you start dialing up with a safe number. Yeah, some of the scams that we'll see targeting, like we said, not just our elder community, but they are more susceptible because they're not familiar with the technology, is, a grandchild may contact, their grandparents saying that there's an emergency situation and they need to, Western Union funds or wire me or transfer me, thousands of dollars to help me out of this situation. It may not be the grandchild. It may be somebody who's done the research and stalked social media and found out what their names are, or maybe what they look like or what they sound like. And they're calling this person pretending to be their grandchild using an AI or something that's going to disguise their voice enough to make it sound realistic. So code words are important. You can have a code word with your family members. Hey, if I don't say this specific phrase or this specific word, it's not me. If you don't have a code word in place, you don't want to act on fear and urgency, especially when you're sending lots of money. Take the time to either hang up and call that person back at a phone number or text them at a number that you know is a trusted source. If you have a second phone, pick up that phone and use that to try to make contact with that individual, and talk to somebody else. I mean, they're going to coach you to not reach out to anybody else. If this is urgent, don't do this. Grandma, grandpa, don't call my mom. Don't tell my mom. That's a huge red flag. If you're hearing that, you're probably going to want to contact their parents or the other relatives involved or other family members that may have some familiarity with the situation. The last question I have for you, specifically directed about finances, is let's say a friend or a family member you think might be experiencing financial exploitation, or it happens. Mm-hmm. What are the best next steps to be proactive as much as you can?
Just pay attention. I mean, I think somebody had mentioned, you can do anonymous tips, right? You can report this. It doesn't have to be, and I think we talked about this before, for a lot of these elder abuse scams, we rarely hear them reported from the victim themselves. The victim is typically not going to report it. It's either going to be coming from the financial institution directly or somebody who is a friend or a family member of this person. So if you see something, say something. If you take the time to ask questions and what they're telling you still doesn't sound right, there's no harm in reporting it just to have it looked into.
So I want to take us to our next story, specifically to talk about some of the warning signs. 1 in 10 adults who are 65 or older are expected to experience elder abuse each year, and that's according to the U.S. Department of Justice. It's a scary statistic, and one that people across San Antonio are trying to change.
We have a serious problem here.
Staggering statistics show elder abuse is on the rise in San Antonio.
Those numbers are scary and they're high.
Over the last 10 years in Bexar County, Adult Protective Services saw an increased case count, with a jump of about 2,500 cases. The county says that puts our area near the top of the list in Texas for elder abuse.
Historically, we're either number 1 or number 2 in elder abuse and exploitation and neglect.
Elder abuse is commonly defined as an intentional or neglectful act that causes harm to an older adult by another person. The most common types are physical abuse, psychological abuse, financial exploitation, neglect and abandonment, and sexual abuse. Nationwide, 1 in 10 adults over the age of 65 are expected to experience some kind of elder abuse each year.
Oftentimes when you see them at their most vulnerable, and people do swoop in and take advantage.
Probate court judge Veronica Vasquez says at the county level, she's working to secure grants to help with training and prosecution. She also helps lead the Elder Abuse and Exploitation Task Force.
I'm hopeful that the changes that we're trying to make in Bexar County, that we can be a leader.
The county now is also teaming up with the city to help increase the number of reported cases. District 6 Councilwoman Melissa Cabello Haverda signed this council consideration request. It would look into training all front-facing city employees to recognize the signs of elder abuse.
If they see potential abuse, they're able to identify it and they're able to report it.
This request passed through some initial stages and is now waiting to be heard in San Antonio's Public Safety Committee. But in the meantime, one sentiment is clear across both the county and the city.
The issue is so large.
It's a topic people shy away from.
You see something, you say something, even if you just suspect it.
We have another story on KSAT.com specifically talking about the warning signs. You'll hear from a university health doctor to specifically talk about what some of the things you might look for when it comes to physical abuse or neglect. And we also spoke to a nonprofit family service about what a good caregiver means. And I'm curious, I want to ask that question to both of you. What do you think constitutes a good caregiver? It's a big responsibility to take on.
You know, having a good caregiver, really, it's somebody who has a lot of empathy and that is going to care for their older adult or the individual that they're responsible and have assumed the care for. But one thing that I think we have to always remember is that caregivers need additional support too. So having, agencies that might be able to come in and help them, building in and families pitching in and helping with, that caregiving responsibilities and giving that caregiver a break. And also, there's a lot of different educational opportunities for our caregivers to learn about the conditions of their loved ones so that they can continue to provide the best care for their family members.
Let's talk about, elder abuse is obviously out there, but it's not reported enough. Why is it not reported enough?
Yeah, you're right. It is extremely underreported. I believe the last statistics were for 1 in every 24, for one that's reported, every 24 goes unreported.
Wow.
And then for financial exploitation, I believe it's 1 in 44. So it's extremely low. A lot of times it could just be the people don't know that they're in a state of abuse, neglect, or exploitation. And if you hear me say A&E, that's just exactly what it is abuse, neglect, exploitation. They don't know because they may not know the signs themselves. It could be shame, it could be embarrassment, it could just be that they don't know that entities like APS and other social services exist to help people. They think that this is just how life is, but it could be better. There's people who advocate for the elderly, for the disabled, to make them or help them have a better quality of life. So I think people just sometimes don't know.
And what's the financial side to that? We talked about it too, that people don't want to admit if they have fallen victim to a scam.
Yeah, like I mentioned, a lot of the conversations we have can be confrontational because they don't want to, admit that they've been taken advantage of. They are, like we said, embarrassment and sometimes pride play a factor, and not being told what to do with their money. So it does go unreported, typically, unless it's from a tip within our institution or from a friend or a family member. And it's different with other types of scams. And other demographics are quick to report it if they've lost funds, but for some reason with the elderly community, those aren't reported nearly enough.
So how do we break past this? How do we break past the stigma? And I think you have both said that these conversations and these tips come from family and friends. So that's where San Antonio needs to step up for its older adults, right?
Right. And I think one thing, is opportunities like this. Adult Protective Services is here to protect older adults and adults with disabilities. And, we are here to have people age in place for as long as possible. And I think a lot of times individuals think, don't call them, and because they may take you out of your home, but that's not the goal of our agency. Our goal is to make sure that people can age in place for as safely as possible. And so I think that's one of the things that people just don't truly understand about Adult Protective Services.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think there's a big stigma of social services, of just people being removed from their homes and getting them placed in alternative facilities. We're a least restrictive agency, so we want to do anything in our power to keep them in the home, but not in a state of A&E. We want them safe, loved, protected, with the best quality of care that they can have in the home. And at the end of the day, it is about our client. It is about what they want. If they want to go to a facility, well, we can help facilitate that. We can help get them there. But if they want all the services in the world that are available to them in the home to stay there, we will work with them to try to get them there.
The last question I have for you all is, let's say someone does notice the warning signs of elder abuse. What are the best next steps?
I would say the best next steps would be to call Adult Protective Services. Call our hotline at 1-800-252-5400. We also do accept online reports as well. But the best thing would be is that if you suspect something, say something, because as Marissa mentioned earlier, sometimes when we go in, we'll do a complete assessment. And sometimes we may find that a case might have been called in for neglect, but then it leads to other forms of abuse once we go in and we start figuring out what's going on in that home. So it's always best to just call us and let us go out. And one thing is important is that we don't only just investigate, we will provide services to individuals so that they can live at home more comfortably as well. So it's a two-pronged process.
Yeah, and I'd like to add that it's not just APS that's involved. We work with other entities. We work with the financial institutions. We work with other community services, benefits. So like Social Security, VA. It's a community. It's a village to help address elder and adult abuse. So it's not just us. We're just the phone number that you're calling to report it, but we're working as a team with everybody.
Thank you all so much for joining us today, and thank you all for keeping this conversation going. Elder abuse is an important public health issue that can leave victims feeling deceived, embarrassed, and reluctant to ask for help. How we, as a community, choose to respond or not respond can greatly impact the health and well-being of those who are most vulnerable. Thank you for joining us today, and here's a look at some of the resources we've mentioned in today's show. For more information, you can head on over to ksatcommunity.com.